Ladies and gentlemen, greatness is never birthed in a crowd. The path to purpose, success, and destiny is often a lonely road. If you are unwilling to walk alone, you will never reach the heights that have been prepared for you. Every leader, every innovator, and every world changer had a moment when they had to walk alone, not because they wanted to, but because their calling required it. You must understand, walking alone is not rejection, it is redirection. It is God's way of setting you apart for something greater. Ladies and gentlemen, throughout history, every person who has ever made a lasting impact had to go through a season of separation. Destiny is not found in the comfort of the crowd. It is discovered in the moments of isolation, in the seasons when you feel like no one understands your vision, your purpose, or your calling. Separation is not a punishment, it is preparation. When you study the life of great leaders, pioneers, and world changers, you will see a common pattern. At some point, they had to walk alone. They had to leave behind familiarity, comfort, and even relationships that were not aligned with where they were going. This is one of the most difficult realities of pursuing purpose. You cannot hold on to where you are and expect to move into where you are supposed to be. Abraham had to leave his father's house. He was told to go to a place that had not yet been revealed to him. He had no clear roadmap, no assurance, except a promise. And that promise could only be fulfilled if he was willing to separate himself from his past. Many people want the promise without the process. They want to experience greatness without enduring separation. But destiny does not work that way. If you are not willing to be set apart, you will never step into what has been set aside for you. Joseph was chosen to lead, but his journey to leadership was paved with rejection. His own brothers, his own flesh and blood, were the ones who threw him into a pit. They could not see what was inside of him, and because they did not understand his dream, they sought to destroy it. What Joseph did not realize was that their rejection was actually divine redirection. Sometimes, the people who push you away are the very ones positioning you for where you are supposed to be. Had Joseph stayed with his brothers, he would have never reached the palace. His destiny required separation. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's house, surrounded by wealth, power, and influence. He had every reason to stay where he was, but his calling was not in Egypt. His assignment was to lead an entire nation out of captivity. He could not remain in Pharaoh's palace and still fulfill his purpose. He had to leave, and when he left, he did not step directly into his destiny. Instead, he spent years in the wilderness, alone, unknown, hidden. Why? Because destiny requires preparation, and preparation requires separation. David was anointed king while he was still a shepherd, but after being anointed, he did not immediately ascend to the throne. Instead, he found himself on the run, hiding in caves, separated from his family, from his comfort, and from everything that was familiar. Why? Because destiny requires separation. God had to take him through a season of isolation. Many people want the crown, but they do not want the cave. They want the throne, but they do not want the training. But the training is necessary, and that training often happens in places of separation. Jesus himself understood this principle. Before he stepped into his ministry, he was led into the wilderness. For 40 days and 40 nights, he was alone, fasting, praying, being tested and refined. He could not begin his public ministry until he endured private separation. And even as he walked among people, he often withdrew to lonely places to pray, to hear from the Father, to remain focused on his mission. Because when you are carrying something great, you cannot afford to be distracted by the noise of the crowd. There are moments in life when you will have to walk alone. Not because something is wrong with you, but because something is right with you. Separation is a sign that you are being set apart for something greater. It is the space where you are pruned, shaped, and prepared for what is ahead. The reason many people never fulfill their purpose is that they are unwilling to let go of what is familiar. They fear being alone, so they hold on to relationships, habits, and environments that keep them stuck. But you cannot embrace the new while clinging to the old. The eagle is one of the most powerful birds in the sky, but an eagle does not fly with flocks of birds. It soars alone. It does not need a crowd to validate its identity. It understands that its strength is in its ability to rise above the noise, to ascend to altitudes that others cannot reach. This is the mindset of those who walk in purpose. They are not afraid to be different. They are not afraid to be misunderstood. They are not afraid to walk alone. When a caterpillar is transitioning into a butterfly, it does not go through its transformation in public. It goes into a cocoon, a hidden place, a place of isolation. It enters a season where no one sees it, no one applauds it, no one recognizes what is happening. But in that place of separation, a metamorphosis is taking place. And when it finally emerges, it is no longer a crawling creature bound to the ground. It is something new, something transformed, something that can fly. Some of you are in a season of separation right now. You feel like no one understands you. You feel like you are being pulled away from what is comfortable. You feel like doors are closing, friendships are shifting, and life is pushing you into isolation. But what if I told you that this is not rejection, but redirection? What if I told you that what feels like loneliness is actually preparation? What if I told you that the very thing you are resisting is the thing that will position you for your destiny? Separation is necessary. Separation is uncomfortable. But separation is also the birthplace of transformation. Every person who has ever achieved greatness has had to endure seasons of loneliness. It is an unavoidable reality, a necessary price that must be paid by those who desire to live a life of purpose. Many want success, influence, and impact, but few are willing to walk the lonely road that leads there. Loneliness is not a sign that you are lost. It is a sign that you are being set apart. It is the evidence that you are on a journey that few are willing to take. When you step into your calling, you will quickly realize that the higher you go, the fewer people can go with you. The conversations change, the company changes, the support system you once depended on begins to shrink, and you find yourself standing alone. This is the price of greatness. Throughout history, we see this pattern repeat itself. The greatest men and women to ever walk this earth did not live lives of comfort and ease. They endured rejection. They faced opposition. They experienced isolation. The path of purpose is not crowded because it requires sacrifice, and sacrifice always comes with seasons of loneliness. Moses was raised in Pharaoh's palace, surrounded by power and influence, yet he had to flee into the wilderness, where he spent 40 years in isolation before he was ready to lead. The man who was chosen to deliver an entire nation had to first endure years of separation. Why? Because destiny does not come without a price. You cannot lead people until you have learned how to walk alone. You cannot guide others if you have never experienced the weight of solitude. David was anointed king as a young man, yet after his anointing, he did not immediately sit on the throne. Instead, he spent years on the run, hiding in caves, separated from his home, his family, and his people. He was chosen, but he was also isolated. He was anointed, but he was also abandoned. His greatest victories did not come while he was surrounded by people. They came in the lonely places, in the moments when he had no one to turn to except God. Joseph had a dream, but his dream cost him everything. His own brothers despised him. The people he trusted betrayed him. He found himself thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and locked in a prison cell. His journey to the palace was paved with rejection and solitude, but what looked like punishment was actually preparation. If Joseph had not endured the lonely places, he would not have had the character to handle the responsibility of leadership. Jesus himself understood this reality. Though he was followed by crowds, there were moments when he had to withdraw to lonely places. There were moments when even his closest disciples could not understand him. And in his greatest moment, the moment before the cross, he was left alone, abandoned, rejected, and despised. Greatness is not given to those who crave comfort. It is given to those who can endure the weight of isolation.